Hello, my name is Wolfgang Karstens, and welcome to Poets Underground, a poetry show that celebrates the best and the brightest lights in contemporary poetry today. My special guest tonight is Mr. John Yamrus. John has been a fixture on the poetry scene since 1970. He has an impressive list of publication credits, which include over 1,500 poems published in magazines around the world, 22 books, 2 novels, 20 volumes of poetry, and his work is taught at both the high school and the university level. John's work has been translated into numerous languages, including Spanish, Swedish, French, Romanian, and his work has been described by the great United Kingdom poet Milner Place as a sharp blade made of smooth, honest steel with the sharpest of edges. Mr. John Yamrus, how are you doing tonight?
Very good, Wolf. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome
to be here.
All right. You've been publishing now for over 41 years.
43 years. My first book came out in 1970.
Oh, so you're about 22.
I was 20.
20 years old.
At the time, yeah.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. So, publishing then, from your first book until this book, what is it that keeps you going?
A thick skin and determination. Maybe being too stupid to know when to quit. But I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy getting down there and trying to write every day. And that's one of the main things is, I don't write something good every day, but I do try every day. Or at the very least, I'll write to a publisher and query them or something.
Right.
And I do something pertaining to the writing every day that's very important for me. And that translates for me into the fact that I've had 1,500 poems published in magazines around the world. That's just indicative of day after day and slogging it.
That's amazing, 1,500 poems published in magazines around the world. I gotta say, today you are still writing stuff that is fresh, exciting, as important as anything being written today. Now, as far as you go, have you reached a point in your writing where you're really comfortable? Like you've reached that point where you want to be?
I should say no, but I feel really comfortable where I am now because, 35 years ago I would edit and cut and edit and cut, and now a lot of that's just done in my head before it even gets to the paper. So I've gotten more facile at that type of things.
Right.
It's just like a ball player. You get that muscle memory, and now I guess I'm a muscle head.
So you kind of answered my question, which was how's your work evolved from writing back then and writing today?
It's gotten easier, it's gotten quicker, but again, that just comes from practice over time.
Great, excellent. Now, would you be so kind as to read us some poetry?
I'd be happy to. That's not being kind. That's being kind to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a poetry show, and we want lots of poetry, Mr. John Yamrus is going to drop some bombs here. John?
Thank you. And as I've gotten older, I'd like to think that the poems have gotten sharper and more precise, like what Milner said. And some get very short. Q. She told me she'd send me a letter. Object lesson. When looking in the mirror, it's often best to overlook the beginnings of a sag under the chin and wrinkles under the eyes. It's often best to ignore the gray around the temples and the bloodshot eyes. No, what you really have to watch out for is that look of fear and resignation, even terror. It'll get you every time. I bought the new Bukowski book yesterday, and it's sad. They've been picking his bones for 16 years now, bringing out new books of poems every year, each one getting worse and worse and worse. Publishing every poem, every piece they can get their hands on, thousands of them. They must be near the end, though. This one's hardly more than 100 pages long. We've finally squeezed the life out of you, haven't we? I guess what we got, what we always wanted. And now, after years, of weaker and weaker poems, we finally managed to run you to ground. And you finally become what we always wanted you to be. One of us. This is about a television program I was on a while ago, which has seemed to have taken on a life of its own as far as what went on. He looked at me and asked, "In your writing, don't you even care about musicality?" You could feel the sarcasm and hate coming out of his pores. It was live TV, and what I should have done was taken a leak on his desk. But I just sat there and stared at him, enjoying the moment, letting him squirm. It was one of the few questions he asked during the interview, and it didn't even deserve an answer. After that, he shut down completely, and I finished the interview alone, reading my poems right straight into the camera. It was all quite dramatic. You know, there's something good about being hated. It's as real as rain. When it was finally over, he left immediately, and I drove home with the radio off, more than content to listen to the sound of distant thunder. I spent the night sitting in my chair, listening to this set of tapes I bought earlier in the day. Old radio shows from the 40s and 50s, hard-boiled detectives, men like Philip Marlowe and Boston Blackie and Johnny Dollar. Tough guys who knew their way around a knife and a gun and a dame. Men who talked fast and walked slow. Men of wit and courage and charm. For 3 hours I listened. Then, tired, I finally took one last slug of beer and walked out onto the back porch, hoping that someone would be stupid or foolish or desperate enough to try and sneak up and slug me from behind. A lot of my poems and my books are about dogs, and my wife and I are dog lovers, and for years people have been saying, why don't you collect some of the best dog poems and put it out into one book? And finally, thanks to you, I had a publisher who understood the importance of that kind of project, and we published my book, Bark, which collected some of my best dog poems. I'll read a few of those. Silly me. I'm a pack rat. I've saved everything. I must have at least 250 pens saved just in case. I've got bits and pieces of cable wire and connectors, curtain rods from windows in an old apartment, dried flowers, bricks, bits of boards. I've got even tacked up on the wall right in front of me now a veterinary appointment from a dog that died 2 years ago. God, I love that dog. And all the sick, perverted bastards of the world deserve to die an awful bloody death. I was picking my dog up at the vet today, and while I was waiting for them to bring her out, I looked over at the big white dog on my right and was shocked to see it had an ear missing, and part of its skull was gone. It looked like an old wound that had healed over, and I nodded at the owner and asked, "What happened to your pooch, man? She get hit by a car or something?" "Nah," he said, "she's a rescued dog." I hadn't heard the term before, and I said, "Rescued?" "Yeah, we found her in the road, thrown out with her ear gone and her head half torn away." "What happened?" "The cops said they see it all the time. They figure she was raised by people who fight pit bulls. And you can tell by looking at her that she's a real sweetie, and I guess when she wouldn't fight, she was probably just used." "Used? For what? Bait?" Neither one of us said a word. I just knelt down and gave that dog a hug and scratched her neck. And when I did, she turned real quick and gave me a great big, wet, sloppy kiss right on the face. And all the sick, perverted bastards of the world deserve to die an awful bloody death. And this book doesn't just tie in, directly about dogs. A professor in New York related that it ties in the whole spectrum of life, and that's what I was hoping to hit when I took that shot at the mark. Picture this. This basement where I write is lined with books, and where there are no books, there are DVDs of old movies. And where there are no old movies, there's a refrigerator filled with beer and a cabinet filled with wine. Put in a bathroom and I could easily live down here. But then there's the dog, there's the world, and you. Okay, Mr. Death. I'm not so young and stupid to think you haven't stacked the deck. You do own the house, you make the rules, but today the victory is mine. Today I've managed to fight you to a standstill. Today I've got this poem, this glass of wine, I've got my wife, my books, and over there I've got that stinking, snoring dog. That's victory enough for me. Today, Mr. Death, you lose, and the glory of the gods is mine. I wrote the next book called They Never Told Me This Would Happen. And you did this to me and for me. And it was wonderful. Because we had an artist doing the cover. And he did the front cover, which is very obviously the beginnings of a noose. And I wrote to him saying, I don't like it. That's not me. And you slapped my wrist and said, he's the cover artist, let him finish his job. This was right after our dog died. And he sent the back cover. The back cover is a dog toy. And that's the exact duplicate of a dog toy we had out in the yard right after that dog died. And I thought, couldn't get any better than that, man. It was perfect, and I just felt so happy about it.
You know, what I love about that too is how the rope, you can use the rope for something good, you can use it for something bad, you can hang yourself, it can be a dog's toy. So it's really all in, and what you do in your work is the transcendence. You know, you provide the setting, and then you let the reader get involved and take it up to some other level.
Well, I think the beauty of what you do is you allow people to do what they do. And that means the world to me and a lot of other people. Anyway, he asked me, how do I write a poem? And when do I know it's done? That was a fair enough question. So I gave him a fair enough answer. I told him that I write it all down. I write it all down and start cutting. I keep cutting till I hit bone. And when I do, there's your poem. Every now and then I throw in a love poem. I think the time you're most beautiful is when your face is swollen from sleep and your hair is matted and messed, and I stand at the side of the bed, the king of all I am and all I have and all I will ever be. This next poem was illustrated by a great illustrator. And I wish I had a copy of the thing here to show, but I sent it to someone. She saw the illustration, she saw the poem, and she wrote back to me saying, Jesus, John, why did you do that? And I thought, man, I did good. It goes like this. He said he did it to see the moonlight shining through her head. Don't let anybody fool you. Poetry, like any other art, when practiced at the highest level, is a business. The ones who sell the most get read the most, and those who don't. Knowing a lot can be far worse than knowing a little, you know. being dead is the question. The answer is only a matter of time. I write a lot about people that I contacted or ran into when I was growing up, and some of those memories stay with you a long time. Old Clarky was known for stripping down and throwing her boobs over her shoulders for drinks. It wasn't very pretty, but it sure was entertaining. I heard she was in show business a long time ago. I wonder what she did. This is from a blog talk radio thing we did that has taken on a little bit of a legend itself, too. Right around the 90-minute mark, the poetry reading got nuts. It was one of those blog talk radio things, and there were 4 of us on the phone from wherever we were. Like I said, right around the 90-minute mark, the wine and the beer kicked in, and Platt, still on the phone, ran out of smokes. So he went to a mini market, still on the phone. And in the lot he sees this girl who was kind of cute, and he starts talking to her. "Hey, you like poetry? I'm on the radio right now. You want to hear some poems?" And he puts her on the phone, and Karsten starts reading. And you can hear Platt in the background trying to talk her boyfriend out of decking him. And when she hands the phone back, Platt says to us, "I'm going to grab another one." And he finds this old juice head sitting in the lot. And Jason Hardug reads him one about his junkie days. And the old guy's almost in tears when he hands back the phone, saying, "God bless you, man. God bless you." You know, that's just the way it goes. Sometimes you're lucky and you find the poem, and sometimes it finds you. You were going to ask me a question about a poem that meant a lot to me, where I learned something.
Well, for me, I'm wondering if you have a poem that best describes your work, the philosophy behind your work.
My modern work, yes. It was kind of like, for me, the Big Bang Theory, my aha moment where I learned something more about my writing. And the poem's very simple. I think it's only 17 words. It goes like this. "Write a poem about that," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed, smiling. Now, what that taught me was I could have written so much more describing what that was, but just leaving it that way, cutting it to the bone, allowed the reader to get involved and bring themselves into the poem. And that taught me so much, and that was my aha moment for my work.
You know, and in that poem too, I can so see the visual. You know, in a lot of ways, have you ever seen Pulp Fiction?
Yes.
You know, the briefcase, but you never see what's in the briefcase. It's just gold, and your mind is left to just go and wander.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're achieving.
Once you cross that line from between the writer and the reader and stand on their side, man, it's so much easier once you learn how to do that. But it's not an easy thing to do. You know,
right.
It took me 30 years to figure out how to get it right.
So, you know, I had a question here. I remember you talking about titles, poem titles. You said, if my poem needs a title, I'm just going to throw it away. In everything that you've read there, I noticed how the first line actually is the title for the poem. But in Object Lesson, for instance, you do actually have a title there.
Well, the title is Object Lesson.
Right. So what is the value of not having the title?
Because I think having a title disrespects your reader. It dumbs them down. It makes me feel, at least, that I got to explain something to these poor schmoes, and I don't want my readers I don't want to look down on my readers. I respect them too much to do that to them.
Right. Do you think a title kind of takes away from that, getting them involved in that sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I want to tell you a story. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was living through World War II. Maybe it was the Depression. But members of my Uncle Joe's generation always seemed to see themselves as part of a collective, a group. It was never I or me. It was we or us. Now, Uncle Joe, he was a storyteller in the family. He'd tell stories about high school and his two favorite teachers. He named them Chisel Chin and Hatchet Face. He told stories about the war and serving in this same army group as Clark Gable. So a couple of years ago at a family reunion, Uncle Joe was swapping war stories with Uncle Leonard. Uncle Leonard talked about his aircraft carrier getting hit by a kamikaze plane. And these days, with computers, someone actually went downstairs and found a combat photo from that occasion of that plane just before it hit the ship. And there they were, these two old men. When they saw that picture with the plane slicing through the sky, they stood up, and they were collectively young and tall and strong. I saw them at their finest, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Excellent. That is absolutely amazing. It's wonderful to watch you read. You know, now, I see you, of course, this is my first show. You can tell that I'm stumbling here, but you're a seasoned pro. Now, tomorrow night, you're going to be down at Brittany's Lounge in Edmonton, Alberta. You record, is it your first spoken word CD? So, insofar as that spoken word CD, what does that mean for you in the body of your work?
It means several things. It's going to add one little more piece of credibility, substance to my work, but it's going to be also a throwback to the old days when I remember being a kid. I'd listen to, in those days, records of Ezra Pound reading or Dylan Thomas reading, and it's an attempt to bring spoken word poetry back where it belongs and make it more accessible than it has been in recent years.
Right. And that's exactly where my love for the spoken medium comes from. You know, I remember even in university when we were talking about how you like to read poetry, and I like to have poetry read to me, and especially by the poet. So, the people at Brittany's tomorrow, and obviously anyone who purchases the CD, what can they expect?
In what term?
From you. What can they expect from the show?
From the show? I don't want to take myself too seriously. I want the audience to have fun. I don't want it to be a traditional poetry reading. I want to get people shaken up. I don't know how we're doing for time here, but I wanted to, while we still have a few moments, as I've gotten older, I said my stuff has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, and so much so that if I just read one at a time, it wouldn't really make sense. So I thought, let's try an experiment. Read a whole bunch of them together and see what happens, and see what kind of dynamic these whole bunch of unrelated short poems bring to each other, and see if it works. Maybe it won't. I'll tell you one thing for certain: I've got a lot more yesterdays than tomorrows. The only thing good about that is they all were spent with you. If being dead is the question, the only answer is a matter of time. I'd like to know why it all went so very wrong. It's time to name the cliff that I'm being held over. Poetry is a bloodstore, practice to keep the wolves from the door and the ghosts from the mirror. I am here with my pain, and you are there with yours. He knew it as sure as he knew anything in his life. No summer is endless. There is nothing sadder than a dead dog on the side of the road. He said he did it to see the moonlight shining through her head. The dog simply and calmly died. She hurt somewhere, she said. I know, he said, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Tell me a story. I don't know any stories. Tell me a funny one. If I knew one, I'd keep it to myself. They made him a god because it made them feel good. They never felt responsible for the raw deal they dealt him. Weep for Jack Kerouac.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. That is absolutely phenomenal to hear you reading those short poems stacked together. And you're right. Very smart, intuitive.
Thank you.
That work very well together. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining Poets Underground. John, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for having me as your first guest.
I love it. I love it. And I hope you guys love it, and I hope you'll tune in again. If you want to know more about John Yamrus, if you're looking to purchase his book, availability, please visit www.johnyamrus.com. My name is Wolfgang Karstens. Thank you. John, do you have any final words?
You can find my books also on Amazon if you're looking. Of the 22, most of them are still available on Amazon. So if you're looking, try there too.
Excellent. And what do you have coming up?
I have coming up a children's book, and we just put the final thoughts about my next book of all new poetry, which is going to be massively thick, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.